Well, I think we can probably get started. So there's about 16 people online, which is a little bit less than last time, but it's also just after AGU and holidays. So today, I just want to give you a quick update on what we've been doing in the past month and any progress that we made. And the biggest issue is to hopefully pick a name for the journal by the end of the year. So what I'd like to do today is just give a quick update on the situation with the partner that we're hoping to use and the funding. Secondly, during the last meeting, there was some concern about getting indexed and having an impact factor. So I looked into this and I'll give you an update on that. And thirdly, I want to give you just a brief overview of what I think the website of the journal is going to look like and what text needs to be written and what text has already been written. Then just briefly go through some recent upcoming events, such as LPSC, which I think will be big for us, and then also EGU, if anyone's going to that. Next, just want to make a call for volunteers to help with a couple things. One will be creating a pre-launch website, starting to create some kind of media team where we can promote the content in the journal, and also creating a reviewer database. And then lastly, which will probably take up most of the time, will be just discussion about the name of the journal. And this is something that I'm going to start a vote tomorrow and then have it run until the end of the year. And then hopefully we'll have a name that we all agree on for our LPSC abstract. Okay, so just a quick update with the situation with our partner in funding. There's not too much to report here. We did have a discussion with the direction of IPGP, and they were very positive about what we're doing, but they think that the funding would most likely need to come from the University Paris-Cité and not from IPGP. And University Paris-Cité is just one hierarchical level above IPGP, and this I actually think is the best solution anyways. So Marc Chaucidon, who's a director, is going to soon discuss this with the president of UPC, who's Edouard Kaminski. And Edouard, he's already familiar with our project, and I'm just waiting to get some kind of official reaction from them. And then after we get a response from them, which will hopefully be by the end of the year, we can then assess whether we need to look into alternative sources of funding. And one of the things that we brought up before was maybe doing some kind of partnership with Europlanets. Another thing which is kind of interesting in this regard is I just had a conversation with Paul Byrne, who has an initiative to create a professional planetary science society. And their initiative just started, just like this one, so it's a bit too early to talk about transferings of funding and things like that. But I think they're probably going to launch at roughly the time we will launch, and there's going to obviously be some possibilities for collaboration with them in the future. And also, as I mentioned in the last meeting, I'm open to alternative solutions for funding this journal. Since I work in France, I'm looking for a French solution just because it'll be easier for me because I know the people here and how things work. But if anyone here has some other ideas or would like to take the initiative and talk to their libraries, their national funding agencies, or other societies, please go ahead and do so. So the more funding we get, the better. So do people have any questions about the partner and funding situation before I move on?
Yeah, maybe I have one. Could you hear me?
Sure. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. I don't understand really this initiative of creating a professional planetary science society by Paul Byrne, because there is already something in the US and something in Europe. So what is really the purpose of this new society?
Well, the idea, as I understand it, is that there is no real professional society in the US for planetary science. There is the AGU, but the AGU is not strictly planetary science. It's actually geophysics. It's not even geology. So I think their initiative is going to be US focused, but at the same time try to make it as international as possible. They're very early in the discussions about this, and I brought up to them that if they do this, they should try to make it non-US based and make it an international society, but we'll see how that happens. But
Okay,
I think
there is DPS. I think it also belongs to a science society, isn't it?
Yes, if you believe that astronomy, well, DPS is funded by the American Astronomical Association, and they are astronomy based. So I think the issue that Paul was having is that he wants to have some kind of formal procedure where they can actually discuss with politicians in the US. And I think in terms of the DPS, that they don't do a good job for that. And also, I don't think the AGU does a good job either. So I think that's the rationale that he's coming from.
Okay, so let's see. So in any case, I think it's a good opportunity for this journal. And just an update. I tried to push for that at Université Paris-Saclay. We discussed that last time, but unfortunately, I have no answer at the moment, still pending. So I will stay in contact and give you more information soon, I hope.
Okay. Yeah, things are really slow in France at this point, so it doesn't surprise me. But I think what we have to do is in January, we really need to start pushing people, saying that if they don't make a decision, that we're going to move on without them. And I think that's going to be the way to force them to at least give us some kind of idea of where they stand on this. Any other questions or comments about this? There's also a meteorological society. That's true. I haven't thought about that, but I will discuss that. I will look into that. Yeah, I think if we go the route of trying to get the different professional societies to fund this, most likely it would have to be a basket of different associations. So it'd be the US initiative, Europlanets, something like the Meteorological Society, and maybe DPS. So that's the way I'm looking at things. If things don't go through the French university system, that we will try to get several professional societies to back us.
Sorry, Mark, when I mentioned the Meteorological Society, it has its own journal. I wasn't thinking of that in terms of funding. I was thinking that in terms of Paul Byrne's initiative.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really understand why another planetary science society is necessary or hugely helpful, but yeah.
Well, I think meteorological the Meteorological Society doesn't represent all planetary science, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, I mean the name is meteorological, but if you look at their scope, it's planetary science. So yeah.
Well,
maybe it's got a branding problem. I don't know.
Yeah. In any case, this is not my initiative. I'm just bringing this up because it may be interesting to us in a year's time. And my understanding, Paul Byrne's perspective is that he wants someone to be able to speak to Congress when things like Arecibo happen. And no one in AGU made a formal announcement about Arecibo, nor any of these other societies. So I think that's where he's coming from.
Okay.
In a related topic, if I can jump in, GSA, the Geological Society of America, also has a planetary science division. And as far as I know, there is no journal associated with that division in there. So that may be also a venue that to contact, but I don't have good contact just that.
Those are all good ideas. Yeah. Okay, so I'll go on next to the question of indexing and impact factor. I think it actually was Laurent who brought this up, that this could be an issue and that some people may not want to publish with us, especially if we cannot get our content indexed and get an impact factor. So I did talk to several of the geoscience Diamond Open Access journals, and it turns out that Volcanica actually is indexed in the Web of Science today, and they will soon have an impact factor, probably at the end of this year. Now, the other Diamond Open Access journals, they're a bit younger and they haven't started the process yet, but I think Seismica is probably going to start this process next year. Now, for Volcanica, it turns out that it was a huge pain in the ass for them. It took about 2.5 years to get accepted into the Web of Science core collection. But since then, Clarivet has simplified the process somewhat. And also based on the mistakes that Volcanica made, I think that we could speed up the process significantly as well. So I sent an email to Clarivet just to get some clarification on a couple issues. And the first was, when can we start the process of being evaluated for their core collection? And their response is pretty much whenever the journal is in a stable state, we can start the process. And the second question I had was, when they accept us into the core collection, do they index all of the content from the journal, or is it only the content from that point forward? And the response was that they indexed the current year and 2 prior years of content from the date of acceptance. So what this means for me is that we should probably start the evaluation process by the end of the first year, and that we shouldn't have any problems. I also need to look into Scopus, but I never use Scopus, but that's obviously something we need to look into as well. So does anyone have any questions or comments about this stuff? No? Okay. This is pretty straightforward. So next thing is I just want to give you a kind of a brief overview of what I think the journal website is going to look like and how it's organized and what kind of content we need to write. And this is kind of the way I envision things. So the first thing is we'll obviously have a home page, and this will just be a couple line sentence describing the journal, some recent news events, and the recently published content. The next thing we'd have is a drop-down menu for About, and this would have a page about the journal, which would mostly just have the journal scope and a section about the journal principles. There would be a page about the governance of the journal, which would mostly be run by the steering committee and also the editorial board. There would be a section describing the editorial board, who's on it and what they do. Most likely there'd be a section describing the media team, also a frequently asked questions, and just a contact, how to get in contact with the journal. Next, there'd be a drop-down menu for issues and the published content, and this would just be recently published material, the latest issue on all the issues that we published. Next, we'd have a drop-down menu that's only for authors, and this would first start out with the types of articles that we accept. It also have the manuscript preparation guidelines, and it would also have a description of the peer review process and a link to submit a manuscript. The next drop-down menu would be the policies. There's about 10 of them here. This is all to be debated, what needs to be written. And next we'd have just a link to the news, which would be announcements from the journal. And then the last thing I think we need is some kind of menu which concerns the community side of the journal. And this would include links to the reviewer expertise database, also a page describing how to get in contact through the community forum and through social media. And then also a link to an external site that we would use for an external blog in order to promote the content in the journal. And everything that's in bold and purple here has kind of been written, so it's already on the forum, so please go there and check it out. The rest of the stuff needs to be written, and the hard part would be writing all the policies. But I think the policies aren't too important, and we can put this off until we have the editorial board put together. So does anyone have any questions about this?
Just a comment. That's
sure,
great.
go ahead.
Perhaps on the issues section, we could have something related to the special issues collections.
Yeah, that's actually one thing we need to discuss. We need to write a policy that describes how special issues are treated. And another thing we need to think about is whether the special issue will be a separate issue or whether it will be incorporated into the present issue that's being published. But yeah, you're right. We should put a link to special issues as well. Anything else for this?
Mark, Adrien here. I had a question in the chat. For the contact, do we need a physical address and even in general, do we need a physical address for the journal? And if yes, would that be IPGP? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so there's two issues here. The first is that in order for Clarivet and others to index the journal, they have a quality control process, and one of the things that they require is that there is a clear contact for how to contact the editorial board or how to contact the technical people and things like that. So we have to have just an email contact for that. But then there's another issue about actually who owns the journal. And this is something that we will discuss after we find funding, because we can actually self-publish this ourselves as a nonprofit association, or the journal could be owned by the university. and I'm not really sure what's the best choice at this point. I think Volcanica, they are actually self-published, and I think the other journals like Seismica, I think they're actually owned by the university that is publishing them. But this is something that we'll discuss once we figure out who's going to actually fund the journal. So the question about accessibility for the sites and the individual submissions, yeah, this is something that we need to consider, but I'm not exactly certain exactly what the question is. But yeah, this is something that we do need to think about, and I think we just need to look at what the best practices are with the other journals. Okay, well, let's move on to the upcoming events. So the first big one is LPSC. And what I'm going to try to do is write an abstract before the end of the year, hopefully before Christmas, and then let everyone comment on it. And my attitude is that anyone who wants to be part of this can be, even if you did not write one letter in the abstract, or even if you haven't been active on the forum or anything. If this is an initiative that interests you, and that especially if you've made any contribution to the discussions, like of course your name should be on the abstract. So once I have the abstract written, I'll just ask for people to sign their name, or if they want to be part of this. Secondly, what I think we need to do is reserve a room for some kind of community information town hall session at LPSC, and this would be during the lunchtime sessions. For this, I think that there's going to be a call for reserving rooms in February, but I'm not exactly certain. But I'll look into this because we need to make sure that we get one. And also at LPSC, we need to heavily advertise the journal. And also, I think at this point, we will have an open call for editors and associate editors, which needs to be advertised heavily at LPSC as well. So anyways, I plan on going to LPSC. Hopefully other people here will be and can help promote this initiative. Now, I will not be going to EGU. So if anyone is going to EGU, and if anyone wants to write a short abstract and present a poster, or even an oral presentation, by all means, you're welcome to. And you could just take the text from the LPSC abstract and copy paste it, as far as I'm concerned. So if there's anyone that wants to do this at EGU, just let me know, and it's yours. So any comments about LPSC or EGU? Any volunteers for EGU? Martin, I think you rose your hand.
Yeah, I'm not going to, I can't go to EGU, unfortunately, myself. But so if you write an abstract for LPSC, in the same, with the same order, with the same authors. I mean, you could just submit the same to EGU, perhaps. And then somebody who goes will present it. It will be quite simple, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, the abstract for EGU is shorter, so it'll actually be easier to write the abstract. The only hard part is we'll probably have to make a poster, but we can maybe use the same poster for LPSC. But the LPSC posters are roughly about half the size, so maybe it won't work out that well.
Okay.
But if anyone, as far as I'm concerned, if anyone is going to EGU and wants to stand in front of the poster for a half hour, we can submit something. If no one's going to go, I'm not just going to write a phantom abstract that no one's going to send in person.
Hey, Mark, I'm going actually at EGU. And so it's more than okay for the poster, but also we used to do a town hall about open science. And so it would be perfect as, of course, the town hall at EGU is very relaxed, but it would be interesting to advertise this initiative also at the town hall for. It is OSGeo, is geospatial, but also people from Planetary used to come by.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And if there's more than just you going, then I think we definitely should try to reserve a room or make some kind of town hall meeting like that as well. Or or maybe even participate in one that's already ongoing about open science.
Yeah, I think
And
if someone of us is going, like if you are like 3 of us, a town hall can be organized by itself.
Yeah.
So it's an
Another
idea.
thing that a lot of these other journals like Geodynamica and Tectonica and Seismica, there will probably be more people going to EGU than going to LPSC. So it's possible that we can try to contact everyone and make one global event for Diamond Open Access journals in the geosciences. So I will try to bring that up with some people and see what they think. I think the abstract deadline is January 15th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, correct.
So it's for LPSC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any help you need with designing a poster, I'm happy to help if I have.
Okay, that's great, because that's not my expertise.
Yeah, just send along the content, and then we can work on a design. No worries. Yeah.
Okay, and then the last thing before we move on to the journal name is that probably not much is going to get done until LPSC just because of the holidays, but I am looking for a couple of volunteers to help me with some things. The first is that once we have a name for the journal, we need to make some kind of simple website just to advertise what we're doing, to maybe have some just some news on a news feed on the website and something like the journal scope, just so people know what we're doing. So if anyone likes making websites, very simple ones, this would just be a HTML. It doesn't have to be anything anything complex. But if anyone likes doing this kind of stuff, let me know. If not, I'll do it myself. But it will be just some Jekyll template, and I'll do my best. But I'm not promising it'll look good. The other thing is that we need to start thinking about what the media team is going to be doing with our journal. And I think the media team is going to be somewhat independent. They will probably have their own websites where they will promote the content of the journal. And we need to start thinking about how that's going to be done, what they're going to promote, if it's all going to be author contributed material, or whether there's going to be editorial type material written by people of the journal itself. And the last thing we need to start thinking about is the reviewer expertise database. This is mostly done, but we just need some people to fine tune it. The first thing is we need to create a subject index for all the expertise for all the reviewers. And this is mostly done on the forum, but it still needs some fine tuning. So I think, first of all, we just need someone to go through there and make sure that all the subjects are represented. But then we also need someone to take the Seismica reviewer database website and code and just change this for our own purposes. And as far as I understand, this is fairly simple, but it's just, it's a little bit of programming and a little bit of web stuff. It shouldn't be too hard. But if there's someone who likes doing this stuff, please raise your hand. In the worst case, I'll do it myself, but it just takes away time from other things I could be doing. So does anyone have any questions about these three things here?
This is Rona. I'll be happy to contribute to putting the website together. I don't have expertise of starting them, but once there's a template and you need to kind of like, fill up the different sections, I'll be happy to be part of that.
Okay. Well, there's two things for the pre-launch website. Unfortunately, what we need is someone who can start from scratch.
Yeah.
And in terms of there's going to be very little content on the pre-launch website. It's just going to be this scope and a couple news events and a link to the LPSC abstract and stuff like that. In terms of the media team, I think that's going to be more like from the perspective you're discussing, where we probably will use some kind of content management system. And it'll be a thing where you log on, you create a new web page, you fill out the form, and you click publish. And we will need people for that, and that doesn't require any knowledge of web design or anything. So
Yeah.
I think there's room for lots of people to contribute. But for the pre-launch website, what we really need is something that's started from scratch, unfortunately.
Is it possible for us to do something with Wix or WordPress that offer you a template?
Yeah, exactly. Someone has to install the WordPress and find the template and get everything up and running.
Or
and I can offer. Go ahead.
Sorry to sorry. Or we could use Sphinx, Python Sphinx. I'm using this for many websites. It's very simple. It looks okay, and it's easy to implement. I have stuff laying around I could adapt.
Yeah, for the pre-launch website, I think something that's done in Sphinx or something that's done in Jekyll or even like Hugo or some of these like more command line type things, like that's fine. Just something where you can convert Markdown to a static web page.
Yeah, exactly.
For when we make the media websites, that's going to be something different though, and that will need to be accessible to people who know how to program, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So in any case, if there's anyone that likes doing this kind of web stuff, just raise your hand and just, you can do it. Okay, now we can maybe move on to the last and most important part, which is trying to find a name for the journal. So as everyone knows, we kind of had a big vote about a month ago where we had a bunch of names and we kind of down selected it to the top 7 contenders. And then we had to throw away a couple names because the name was already taken or there's some other issues. But these are the 7 names that we've retained. And we can add additional choices. But today is really the last day to do this. And I think the only name that came up several times on the forum that people might want to have added to this is the name Planetology. So if people want to add Planetology, we can. It's not my favorite name, but I understand some people like it. And after today, what I'm going to do is start a vote tomorrow. I'll send out an email tomorrow afternoon, and the vote will run until the end of the year. And what I'm going to do for the vote is use what's called ranked choice voting. So you pretty much just order the names in terms of preference. And what happens with ranked choice voting is that if your preferred choice is eliminated, then your second choice gets used. So your vote always counts, but you just have to really think about how you rank these issues, rank the choices. So I'm just going to go through what I think about these names, and I'm just going to leave the floor open for comments. This is kind of, so this is my biased viewpoint of the names that have been proposed. So first of all, my favorite is Planetary Research. This is a short 2-word name that doesn't have an acronym or doesn't need an acronym. And it easily distinguishes itself from other journals because it doesn't use the phrase planetary science, which is in a lot of journal titles. Now, there was a concern, which I know Laurent had and I also had myself, that searching on Planetary Research might just bring up too much junk on the website because it's kind of a vague name. This is totally true for geophysical research. There is a journal called Geophysical Research, and if you search that, you just can't find the journal because there's just too much junk in the search results. But if you search for planetary research, you only bring up websites that say planetary science in their titles. So I think planetary research is not going to be as bad as I initially thought it would be. The second choice, that for me anyways, is Advances in Planetary Research, acronym APR, maybe. My only problem with this is that it's similar to Advances in Space Research, which is an existing title in planetary science. But to me, it's not too important, but it is something to be aware of. The third name is Planetaria. This used to be my favorite name, and it's no longer my favorite, but I still think it's worth considering. What's interesting about this is that it's a unique name, a single word. It's similar to the geoscience diamond open access journals like Tectonica and Geodynamica. The problem with this is severalfold. First of all, there actually is a title called Planetaria, which exists in Brazil, and it's a journal about physical planetarium. And on top of that, this could be confused with other existing titles. There's one called Planetarian, which is again a journal about physical planetariums. And there's also another title called The Planetarian, which again is about planetariums. So my big concern with this is that planetaria, even though it's an interesting name, it could be confused with these physical planetarium journals. And also, I'm not really sure how this name is going to be viewed 5 to 10 years in the future. If it's going to be viewed as being gimmicky, or if it's going to, stand the test of time. So the fourth choice is Open Journal of Planetary Research. My only concern with this is that I really don't, even though I think I proposed this name, I'm not sure what open means. And open is, I think, in most cases means open access. And it's not clear to me if this is going to be relevant in 5 to 10 years time, because there already are a lot of open access journals. And I think in 5 to 10 years, all of the main journals in planetary science will be open access. So it's just not clear to me whether open is just kind of a redundant term, which is if it's going to mean anything in the future. The other choice is a Journal of Planetary Research. My only problem with this is that it's just a boring name, and it's very similar to the Journal of Geophysical Research, Planets, which exists. And then there's two titles which I really don't like at all, and I actually think we might want to consider removing them from the votes if everyone agrees. One is the Open Journal of Planetary Science. And my problem with this is that if you take the existing journal called Planetary Science Journal and then just rearrange the words and then add open to it, that's what you get. So it's a combination of using the word open, which I don't think has much meaning, and also it is very similar to the Planetary Science Journal, which just launched a couple of years ago. And then the last choice, which I don't like at all, is Open Planetary Science. I think this name is probably more appropriate for some kind of an initiative than a scientific journal. So anyways, that's my biased viewpoint of the journal names, and I'm just going to leave this open for discussion from anyone here, if you have any comments. Well, I guess to first start, do people think that we should consider Open Journal of Planetary Science and Open Planetary Science? To me, these are the worst options, and if we can just get rid of these because they're not going to win, then it just make the voting procedure easier.
I agree with your dislike for the open stuff. I don't think it's necessary in the journal name.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
So I agree also that
Laura?
OBS, sorry. But I'm not sure why you want to remove them from the list. If you're doing the ranked choice, they will naturally come down.
Yeah.
If the group is actually in agreement with that. So I just
Okay, I don't have a problem. It's just to me, if you actually do if you think about this and do a proper ranking, this is an exercise that can take an hour or two if you do it properly. And I'm not sure how much time people are actually going to spend thinking about this. And the only thing I worry about is people are going to choose their favorite name and put a rank 1 next to it, and then with the rest of them, just kind of order them randomly. That's the only thing I worry about.
if that's what the community does, that's what the community does.
Okay, no problem. We keep it.
That's me. You guys can disagree with me on that, but that's.
Nicola.
Yeah, I think I mean, I have no problem, of course, of leaving all these names in the poll, but we are not that many today. We are 17, and I think lots of people who haven't heard these arguments, which I think are very good arguments for leaving these journals out, may select these journals, but then thinking about it twice and hearing the argument, they might say, oh no, actually that's what happened to me. So I thought Open Journal Planetary Science was cool. Then you wrote down these things, and I thought, yes, yeah, probably it's not a good idea. So yeah, I don't know.
So Yeah, because I'm worried about this too. And what I plan on doing is when I send out an email with the votes, I'm going to summarize all of this right here.
Okay.
But, first of all, I'll tell people you should go to the forum and at least, discuss this with people, see the discussions that have already been made. But since you're not going to do this, here is, kind of the consensus of what has been written and what we feel about these journals. So I will write an email saying that these are the pros and cons for each of these journal names. And on the website with the voting, I'll summarize the same thing so that people are forced to read this and think about it.
I'm okay with that, but I would advise you not to say which one is your favorite or which ones you want out, because that's really biases the audience who hears it. Like today, you're in the presentation, you said, this is what I like. Of course, you are the speaker for this group to a very large extent, and that's a little bit forcing us to think your direction.
Yeah, I totally agree. In terms of summarizing this, I'll try to make it objective. The question whether I keep the order here or randomize the order, that's a different issue, because obviously I am biasing people just by ordering it in this direction. But I will try to make something that's as unbiased as possible with the pros and cons for each choice. And I think there is a on with each of these choices. Even my favorite choice, Planetary Research, I still do think about whether this is going to be a search engine problem or not. And the way I think if it turns out to be a search engine problem, the one way to get around it is to use a URL of something like planetary-research-journal, something like that. But this is something that we all need to think about. And it's the same thing for things like Open Journal of Planetary Research. I probably will write this in the text, but what would you use for a URL for a journal like that? Would it be open-journal-planetary-research? It's kind of a long name, but
I was looking at some of the existing Diamond journals. Their websites often have J in addition to the name of the journal itself, which is an interesting thing, because that's a little bit confusing, in my opinion.
Yeah,
if it's okay to go that direction, you were saying about bringing planetology back in, which I mean, it's like I'm open to that, but brings more choice, etc. One of the other, and to some extent, my first reaction was that no, we voted, but it's true that some people joined the group after voting, so that they didn't really have a voice. Okay. But I think at some point on the website, there was also the choice of Planetologica, which makes it, again, like in the same line as all of the other Diamond Open Access, while being unique. I agree that Planetaria is actually about planetarium. That's what it comes from, right? I mean, technically the plural of that, right? So that's a little bit of an issue. So I was just wondering if you might consider bringing back Planetologica, not Planetology, but Logica, just to make it like everybody else.
If people want to, we can. So what do people think here? It's not my favorite name, so I wouldn't vote for it. But if people think that it should, again, with the good thing with ranked choice voting is that people's vote won't be wasted on something if that's their favorite. So I don't have a problem with adding more titles to this.
Yeah, I'd agree with Laurent to bring Planetologica with the same, let's say, feeling of Planetaria, and Planetologica with a K, right?
I actually don't know K versus C. That's like half the journals have Ks, half have C. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But logic is, I think, more Roman, right, than Greek, if we look back at that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It will be like Greek with a K and more Latin, let's say, with a C. No.
But the word logic at the end, oh yeah, logos, that's actually Greek, right? Yeah, so fair.
I'm a bit hesitant to speaking up because, I think the point being made, there's only 17 of us here, and so anything we say can maybe have too much weight. But I do like the single word names. I think they're stronger. And I'm I also agree very much with your point about open. I think open will be superfluous in 5 to 10 years. And actually, if you have a title that's open, something that already exists, you're kind of implying that the journal that already exists is not open. And I think that's not somewhere we should really go. What I'm curious about is why you like Planetary Research, but don't like Journal of Planetary Research. So you said Journal of Planetary Research is boring, but Planetary Research is not boring. So yeah,
so that's just my opinion. I wouldn't be upset if
sure.
Journal of Planetary Research was chosen. I just personally don't like all of the titles which are Journal of blah blah blah. There's just nothing that distinguishes themselves from all the other thousands of journals that exist. And so and also Planetary Research, it's shorter. I think shorter is better, as you're saying. Sedimentologica, there's probably more syllables in that than there is in Planetary Research, even though it's one word instead of two. So one of the problems I have with that is that even though the name it's a single name, it's actually a very long name.
I do also like the idea of having a name that kind of is somehow associated with all the other Diamond open access journals. So yeah, I see a lot of value in that.
Yeah, the concern, actually, just to be honest with like myself, like most of these titles here, at one point I thought were great, and then I changed my mind. And I always change my mind because of comments from people like you and Laurent and other people here. And this is the one thing I worry about, is that the people who aren't attending these meetings or who aren't reading the forum, they're not going to think about these things. And so in some sense, if they don't want to participate, that's okay. But if they don't think about their vote, then they could vote incorrectly. So. Well, what do people think of planetology as a name? This was brought up about 3 or 4 times on the forum.
I actually thought about it. It's not really a word that I immediately associate with planetary science. I've never heard of it before the discussions here.
Well, it's actually is a word that was used a lot in the US, but in the very early stages of planetary exploration. And the way I look at it, this was the time when people started making up names like the selenotherm for the geotherm of the moon. And people were trying to make up these, new names for everything, for every single planet that we went to visit. And to me, it just connotates this time period of the 60s and early 70s, where planetary science was just developing. And to me, it's an old-fashioned feeling. So and also, as I mentioned on the forum, is that actually in French, planetary science is called planetology. So it's more or less the same word. But it's in the US, it's in the US English, it's clear that people haven't used planetology in a long time. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, to me, it's an old word that's fell out of usage in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, I think the connotation for me would be geology on other planets. If I try,
Yeah.
and our journal is about way more than that. But
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the other-
I understand, if you break it apart, the planet and ology, but I think because it's not in use so much, the connotation is not clear.
Yeah, that's the other problem I have with some of these names, with all names that planetology, even planetary. I asked the question whether that's inclusive to people who study asteroids, people who study interactions between the sun and planets and magnetospheres and things like that. So to me, when I think of planetology, I think of the 1970s when NASA is going to Mars and going to Mercury. And at that time period, there was only a couple planets where we had, good data about.
Yeah.
And there weren't any asteroids that were being studied at that point.
Yeah, so I think that's why I like Journal of Planetary Research because of how close it rings to JGR. It kind of tells you it's like JGR, but it's focused on planets. So it's immediately gives me this feeling like it's going to have a lot of breadth. So it's going to be a lot of topics included, and I think number one is also my favorite right now, but I would say Planetary Research Journal might be nice. Like, so not Journal of, but Planetary Research Journal, if people don't like just the planetary research.
Just want to say that's very close to Planetary Science Journal, PSJ.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I thought of that too. So,
A lot of your comments about planetology might also be shared with Planetaria. I know it's sort of more of a made-up name, but I think it also does evoke that kind, sort of dated word and being focused on planets and less on planetary science. You know what I mean?
well, the one thing I liked about Planetaria is that if you look through the dictionary definitions, almost all the definitions are related to physical planetariums. But there are a couple, I think the original usage of the name came about in the late 1800s or maybe early 1900s, and it was used as a model or representation of the solar system. And even though we don't use the word planetarium or planet in that sense today, there is, to me, like a model of the solar system is an interesting, name for a journal. But I agree that the problem is that I think it's going to be too easy to confuse this with just a planetarium in some city or something like that.
I would also say, just in terms of like the rights of discipline, right? To me, a planetarium or the original model of the solar systems were very astronomy oriented, and therefore it's not obvious that a more like geoscience approach to planetary science would feel at home in this environment.
Does anyone have a comment about advances in planetary research? In the initial votes, I think we had advances in planetary science, but it turns out that there's actually a book series that's published out of Taiwan, which it's not great, but it's not bad either. But it's called Advances in Planetary Science, and I think it'd be a bit annoying for us to use the same title as them. And also, I kind of know the guy in charge of this, so that I don't know how you'd feel about that either. But anyways, so the Advances in Planetary Research is actually a new name since our last vote, and it's just because Advances in Planetary Science, I think, we have to exclude because it's already being used. But does anyone have an opinion about this, or is it just another boring name of a scientific journal?
I can always have an opinion. That's not a problem. But I know that it's not just Advances in Planetary Science. There's a whole series of book series called Advances in all of that.
Yeah.
So to me, this feels like confusing because I would expect to be in that series. But again,
yeah. Yeah, this is the series. I think it's published by Ip Wing, who's in Taiwan and a bunch of other places. And it's not I think he tries to put out a new book every once in a while, but it's not super well known. But yeah, I don't want to try to steal the name away from him. So in terms of the upcoming votes, do you think are people in agreement that we should add Planetologica and Planetology, or just Planetologica? If this is a name that's 25% of people support, then I think we should probably include it. But if it's something that only 5% of people support, then what's the point? So
Would ask the question how were these names were placed with respect to other names that were voted, because if they were placed below other names that are not brought back to the poll, somebody might be upset about that.
yeah.
I was just checking in that poll during the conversation. The last one we have in this list had 10 positive votes, and Planetology had 9, and Planetology had 8. So they were essentially the next one down the list.
Okay. So you're saying that Planetologica was very close to?
I think Planetology had 1 less vote than OPS, and Planetologica, which was actually in the list, had 1 less vote than Planetology.
Okay.
So yes, they were below the ones that were selected, obviously, because they were not selected. But in my opinion, not far behind. But again, so personally, I'm in favor, but everybody else should chime in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the survey.
Put the link in the chat.
Yeah. Well, there was also Planetary Exploration, which had the same number of votes as Planetologica. I don't think that's a good title, just because it's more, it seems like more mission-based than science. And Planetology. Okay. Yeah, okay. So I'm happy with adding both Planetologica and Planetology to the list. Do you think we should remove any of these titles, like Open Planetary Science? I just don't think this is a serious contender. So
I agree, and in general, I would tend to remove all the names, but there are just these 2 which contain planetary science, because it's too widespread among other journals.
So should we remove number 6 and number 7 and add Planetologica and Planetology instead? Does this seem reasonable? Okay, 2 votes up. That means motion is accepted. So, 3 votes, 3 to 0. So, okay. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just remove number 6 and number 7 because I agree, first of all, open is probably not a good choice, and planetary science is too widespread and too generic. And we will add planetologica and planetology in place of those 2. And in terms of the previous votes, as Laurent mentioned, they were the next 2 journal names below the cutoff. So it seems logical to me. Okay, well, that's about all I have to say. So, does anyone else have questions or comments about the journal names, or is there anything else that people want to talk about? I'm happy to stay here for another half hour, but has been 1 hour, so this is probably enough as well. But if there's any other questions or comments about this, now's the time, because tomorrow we will start the official votes. And if there's any other questions that people have in general just about the initiative, please raise your hand. Someone asked on what forum this is being discussed. We have a Mattermost forum, and I can give you the invitation link. The invitation link is not public, but anyone who wants it can get it and can join the forum. I'm just not putting it on a website because we will get spam and people joining up and posting pornography and things like that. So if you don't have the link to join the forum, just send me an email and I'll send it to you. Okay, thanks, Fabio, for showing up. And once we have a name, I'm actually going to ask you if you're interested in trying to come up with a logo for the journal. Maybe this is something we can pay you for as well. And Adam, thanks a lot for showing up. So if there's nothing else, I am going to close the discussion and we'll try to have another meeting 1 month from now.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark, very, very much. Please do
Okay.
send the link so I can post the video of
Thank
this.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for taking care of that, because I know a bunch of people found the previous video online at YouTube. So
Yes,
that's great.
yes,
There.
could be good. Okay.
All right. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Happy
Bye.
holidays.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.